Okay, here we go. I'd like to go ahead and call the regular council meeting to order for the City of Tempe, council meeting for April 23rd, 2020 here in the Harry E. Mitchell Government Center. Due to the concerns over COVID-19 exposure, the city has implemented measures to protect our community, including the closing of council chambers and limiting public attendance to electronic means only. Members of the public may view the live meeting proceedings on Tempe Channel 11 and attend the meeting virtually through the Cisco WebEx events by visiting tempe.gov/clerk for more information and submit written comments via the City of Tempe speakers comment card on the tempe.gov/clerk webpage. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work of our frontline workers, including the healthcare professionals and first responders and critical service staff, food service, and our grocery professionals who are bravely out there serving our community every day. I also want to acknowledge the sacrifices of those who are staying at home, especially those who are experiencing hardship during this time. Staying at home does reduce the spread of the COVID-19, and it helps our first responders and medical professionals to manage the pandemic. And finally, I would like to dedicate this moment of silence to the honor and remember all of those across the U.S. and as well as the globe who have lost their lives to this virus and the loved ones they have left behind who have to navigate the grief in addition to this pandemic. With that, we have a moment of silence. Thank you. With that, if we all could cite the Pledge of Allegiance. For those that are able to, I pledge allegiance to the flag United States of America and to the republic
Which stands
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right,
But we
thank you
should
for
try
that.
that again, you guys.
All right, with that, if we can now turn to our meeting minutes, Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move approval of item 3A 1 through 4.
It's been moved by Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Vice Mayor Kuby. All those in favor, I'm going to have to do a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Kuby,
Aye.
Councilmember Adams,
Aye.
Councilmember Chin,
Aye.
Councilmember Arredondo Savage,
Aye.
Councilmember Keating, Councilmember Navarro,
Aye.
Councilmember Keating again. Keating. Instead of saying Bueller, I'm just going to keep saying Keating. All right. That motion passes. Raise your hand if you see it, Randy. 7-0. With that, I look over to the board and commission and committee meetings minutes. Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move acceptance of item 3B1.
It's been moved by Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll
QB.
second.
Second by Vice Mayor Kuby. All right. Roll call vote. Councilmember Navarro. Councilmember Keating. Joel, you're an aye. Randy raised his hand, so he's an aye. Councilmember Chin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kuby.
Aye.
Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Aye.
Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0. Next, I have some comments for reports and announcements. I have 3 proclamations. I'm not going to read them, but I'm just going to briefly describe what they are. So this week, we have a young child proclamation where Tempe has a deep commitment to the growth and the development of the young children in our community. Initiatives such as Read on Tempe and programs such as Experience Corps all show our dedication in ensuring that all Tempe children's are successful. First Things First is a great partner with us that works to improve the early learning opportunities for the young children, building a foundation of learning for everyone in Tempe. It is with great pride that in Tempe we celebrate the Week of the Young Child for April 11th through the 17th here in the city of Tempe. Next proclamation we have is about the National Public Safety Telecommuters Week. Every year during the second week of April, the telecommunications personnel in the public safety community are honored in this week-long event, initially set up in 1981, if you can remember where you were in 1981, is a time to celebrate and thank those who dedicate their lives to serving the public, especially during this global pandemic. Our public safety telecommunicators have been working long hours and remaining dedicated to answering the calls for service in unprecedented times. It is a week that should be set aside so everyone can be made aware of their hard work and dedication. So thank you to our public safety telecommunicators for the National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, April 12th through the 18th in 2020. And my third proclamation is celebrating the 51st annual Professional Municipal Clerks Week. This will be on May 3rd, this a little in anticipation for the week of May 3rd, through the 9th of May in 2020 will be the 51st annual Professional Municipal Clerks Week, initiated in 1969, which is a great year, by the way. The week is a time of celebration and reflection on the importance of the clerk's office. And again, we see our clerks dedicate their time, energy, and attention to overseeing local elections, public records, minutes of public meetings like we are participating in right now. And we would be lost without our clerks. So thank you to Carla, to Kara, to Karen, to Shirley, and Z for your hard work and patience. So thank you so much. And congratulations on the Municipal Clerks Week to all of our clerks. With that, I will now turn over to our city manager, Mr. Ching.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I just wanted to acknowledge that yesterday was Administrative Professionals Day, and I wanted to extend my appreciation to all of our administrative professionals here at the City of Tempe, and in particular, in the midst of this crisis, how seamlessly and so in such an outstanding manner have adapted their workplace and what they are required to do in a way to continue to provide outstanding service to the City of Tempe. So thank you to all of our administrative professionals. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is our consent agenda. All the items listed on the consent agenda will be considered as a group and will be enacted with one motion by the City Council unless an item is removed for separate consideration. Members of the public may remove public hearing items for separate consideration. Public hearing items are designated by an asterisk, and council members may remove any item for separate consideration. The public may also submit written comments via the City of Tempe speakers and comment card on the tempe.gov clerks page, or you can submit them via an email with councilcommunicator@tempe.gov. Miscellaneous items 5A1 through 5A4, with the exception that 5A4 has been removed on the agenda at the request of the agent representing the applicant and postponed to the May 27th regular council meeting. Awards and bids of contracts, items 5B1 through 5B20, and resolutions, items 5C1 through 5C9. With that, any agenda item that is marked with an asterisk is a public hearing item and it can be removed for separate consideration. I look for a motion on the consent agenda as read with the exception of 5A4.
So moved. Lauren Kuby.
Moved by Vice Mayor Cubey. Is there a second?
Second, Robin.
Second by Councilmember Arredondo Savage. I have to do a roll call vote. Councilman Navarro. Councilmember Keating.
Aye. Yes.
Hey,
hear
there
me?
you are. Councilmember Chin.
Well, it's because I'm in my.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kuby.
Aye.
Councilmember Hernando Savage.
Aye.
Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0. All right, moving on to our non-consent agenda. All the items listed on the non-consent agenda will be heard or will be considered separately. Agenda items scheduled for the introduction and first public hearing will be heard, but will not be voted upon at this meeting. Agenda items scheduled for a second public hearing and final adoption will be voted upon tonight. Just for everyone to know, we do have some quasi-judicial items. The city council sits as a quasi-judicial body when hearing appeals. So in this situation, the city council must conduct itself as a court, not as a legislative body. And pre-meeting contact with the city council on quasi-judicial matters is prohibited. Any materials or conversations concerning the item shall be presented to the city council at the scheduled public hearing. Item 6A1 is to hold a public hearing for an appeal of the Development Review Commission's decision to approve a use permit to allow the addition of a second-story walk deck for the Lewis residence located at 921 South Roosevelt Street. The appellant party is Karen Morrissey and Kathleen Palmer. Per the Zoning and Development Code, an appeal shall be limited to the issues raised in the petition of the Zoning and Development Code, Section 6-803. Information but not included in the petition is not to be considered. So tonight's public hearing is an appeal of the Development Review Commission's decision to approve a use permit to allow the addition of a second-story walk deck for the Lewis residence located at 921 South Roosevelt Street. As I mentioned earlier, the appellant party is Karen Morrissey and Kathleen Palmer. And I am going to ask the appellant party, I think Karen is on the phone as well as Kathleen, to make a joint presentation. Karen, would you like to go first and then Kathy to follow? All right,
Sure, can you all hear me?
we can, thank you.
Excellent. Are you gonna put the PowerPoint up?
Yep, that's coming up.
We can't see her.
All right, take it away, Karen.
Okay, my name's Karen Morrissey. Thank you for hearing our case. I live at 917 South Roosevelt Street. Next slide, please. I understand that some of you are on phone, so I'll try to describe the picture that I have, but I live on Roosevelt Street. It's Wilson on one side, 9th Street and 10th Street on the other. Our entire block is a single-story residence. While we welcome improvement to 921 because it is dilapidated, we don't welcome a second-story. And I'm not going to call it a walk deck because that's the contractor's name. It's a 270-foot party deck overlooking my backyard. There's a privacy issue. They can see into my bedroom and my bathroom. It's the land, there's 10,000 square feet, but it's only 50 feet wide. Venture to bet y'all live, your width of your house is 75 feet. Back in 1944, when my house was built, it was all 50 feet. They're narrow little strips of land. If the Lewises build what they want to build, they would still have 4,500 square feet of ground space, which to put a patio, but they choose to want to put it up at 12 feet in the air overlooking our yards. As I said, it's not compatible with our neighborhood, with our existing structures. And the use permit is you're asking for something more than what the Tempe citizens want. You know, there's the character area 3, you know, been to a bunch of meetings on that type of thing. And do the citizens want a second-story deck that's so big? No, and that's why they have to ask for a use permit. I only spoke with the owner. The owner's Lori Lewis, that's her name on the deed. Once, I let her borrow my lawnmower about a year ago. That's only once I spoke with her, ever. Next slide, please. Okay, the owner's never lived on the property. For 2 years, it's basically been, a vacant house. Owner lives in Scottsdale. The contractor has a business in Phoenix. Contractor doesn't live in Tempe. The owner's son might or might not live on the property. I think that's still really up for debate. The name on the use permit is kind of weird. It's from the contractor, not the owner. But we have established, and I will establish in this presentation, the contractor has no decision-making powers. If you take a look at the little pictures on the side, that's their yard right there. It's not irrigated. It hasn't been irrigated in about a year. And you can see there, it's a real wide, narrow strip. You see the other little picture I have, it's the original use permit. This is the first time we heard about having any sort of building next door was when this sign went up. And taking a look at the sign, I don't even know what's going on. It's in cursive. I thought it said secondary walk deck. And I'm like, what is that? And I couldn't even read the other word. So, it was pretty disguised on what's going up there. You can't really tell. I personally have lived in Tempe since 1983. I've owned and occupied my house since 1996. Thinking that if this is a revenue thing, looking at me, just tell you, I paid $56,000 in my course of my life in money for wastewater to the city of Tempe. I try to help out as a good citizen. I try to give money to charities. I try to support local, all that type of stuff like that. So the City of Tempe planner, though, department has been really helpful to the owner and the contractor. I felt, and this is just my opinion, I felt that I was a bother to them. Even though I think I'm a valuable citizen, I felt like a bother. As first of all, they initially greenlighted a 511 square foot second story deck. That's huge, huge deck for such a skinny little property. And then, writing this really fast sign. Were they in a hurry? Was it really not important? I don't know. Next slide. So use permits have to have 5 points they need to satisfy. This property doesn't satisfy any of the points. If you take a look, this picture is the Lewis property, and I'm standing on my about 4 feet in the air on my ladder overlooking, but you can see I'm only at 4 feet, not 12 feet, and I still feel like that's very invasive, even that look into their house. So increased vehicle pedestrian traffic, yes, that'll bring increased vehicle foot protection or foot traffic into the neighborhood. Nuisance from emission of gas, odor, noise, vibration, yes, this deck will bring noise, vibration from the deck and stairs, light pollution, deterioration of the neighborhood. Deck will open up property to big gatherings. And if this property changes hands, it would be a very desirable home for a frat house or an Airbnb. Quality control and disruptive behavior. I work early in the morning. I support defense. I work for Boeing. So I get up at 6 in the morning and go to work. So if I'm hearing parties at 11 or 12 at night, what am I supposed to do? The noise ordinance is going to kick in at that point. Compatibility of existing structures. Despite the examples the contractor provided at the DRC, all examples are not compatible. The proposed deck is only accessible from the outside. Never seen that. Deck is much larger than any smaller decks in the surrounding area. Much, much, much larger. When you say walk deck, you think it's a little widow's walk. It's not. You could run a little lap on there. Proposed deck is in the middle of the block. All examples, including the one of the Pappas' McMansion on 13th and Ash, those are double lots on corners. We're in the middle of the block, little strip in the middle of the block. So all structures are single story with no decks. Next slide. So support against the use permit with all the surrounding neighbors. I went around to all the neighbors and they all wrote in, all the surrounding neighbors, everybody. And also I went around to all the neighborhood association chairpersons. I know them from living in the city for 30 years. The Mill Wilson Garden Neighborhood Association, all these people, you guys place a lot of comfort in, and a lot of you want to make sure that it works well between the city and the citizens, and these people are the in between there, but nobody listened to what they had to say at the DRC. 25 to 35 emails came through from concerned neighbors, but it wasn't really listened to. And 5 neighbors spoke at the DRC meetings, and you know how fun those are, the 3-hour ones. And so are these opinions not valuable? You know, why did we have all this happen? Everybody got all involved to not listen. And then there was, it just sets a precedent for party decks in our neighborhood. We're not a party neighborhood. There's a whole bunch of people that own their own house on this street, and we don't have big old parties. And I know you can't do anything about it, but I paid for 30 years every month my mortgage. I get only 3 minutes to defend my property rights. So I had like verbal diarrhea when I had to talk, and I didn't get a nice PowerPoint. It was tough. Next slide. DRC Chairman David Lyons. Yeah, 3 hours and 18 minutes into it. We had 6 out of 7 committee members leaning towards no at the initial meeting on January 14th. But it was really, really weird. I urge you to look at the video. Chairman Lyons, he offered the contractor and the owner a continuance, asking the neighbors to communicate. Everybody didn't want it for various reasons, various good reasons why this does not fit in. But Chairman Lyons took it upon himself to give a second chance to the DRC, talking about how when he was young in the year 2000, he jumped up on the roof and he would drink beer in his rental house. You know, if he did that around here, I'd probably call the police. So why are non-elected officials making decisions about my property? Mr. Lyons is wrong about the neighborhood. He said, there's already no privacy. There is privacy. The immediate neighborhood is owner occupied. It's not a bunch of college rentals. He said our houses are tear downs. My house is beautiful. It's in my will to go to my next of kin. It's beautiful. It's going to last for a long time. It's 75 years old this year. And the general plan 2040, it's a cultural resources area. This is originally built for a victory garden in the backyard. That's why we have 10,000 square feet of land. Next slide. So then January 24th, 10 days after the DRC said, hey, owner, developer, get back with the neighbors, see what you can come up with. But we didn't hear anything. We just saw another board go up. This board, though, you see how they're doing it block writing, because we asked them not to use cursive. So that's really good that together we found a way for DRC to improve going forward forever. Hopefully nobody else has to have cursive handwriting big signs. So anyways, the owner and contractor did not reach out to us before the second hearing. We had no communication prior to them submitting plans to the city. When we did see the plans, the deck was still extremely large. Only changing the size, not the design. It's still 270 square feet. It's still really big. Next slide. So changes were made without neighborhood input. This is in what conflict to what the DRC ordered. Temporary walls, the contractor wanted to put it, hey, why don't we put temporary walls up there? But temporary walls are temporary in Arizona sun. 5 years from now, they're not going to be there. And he wanted to add 8 inches of cinder block to it. You see that one picture where Kathy's standing? Because that's the owner's wall there, and it's 8 inches too low, they feel, but that's still not going to block out something that's 12 feet in the air. And, you can see how skinny our yards are. That's Kathy. She's one over. There's a yard in between us. You know, I can hear her sneeze. Next slide. So then on February 3rd, Kathy Palmer went to meet about the proposed deck. I didn't go to the deck. I just got awarded. I was in charge of Europe for all exports for Boeing. It's a little bit going on, plus my dad was sick. So Kathy went on my behalf. She suggested smaller deck, less than 270 feet, smaller balcony, different deck, different area, staircase on the back of the house, spiral staircase on the back of the house, patio cover, no deck, or finish out with a second-story building. I think they were going to build a second story, but then they ran into plumbing problems, they ran into money problems, and then it became this big deck. But then again, maybe it's not going to be, I don't know. I don't know what the owner's intent. It's zoned R2. What are they going to do with the other residential? They're going to max out the land? I don't know. Anyways, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the owner didn't attend the meeting. The owner's son, who's not a decision maker, the developer went to the meeting, but they don't have any decision-making capabilities. And so now this dollar issue became our burden, that we have to have this big, huge party deck in my backyard. So the owner wasn't receptive of any Kathy's suggestion. Next slide. And at the DRC on February 11th, the DRC voted 4-2 in favor of the use permit. 2 different board members were present than the first one. The owner and the developer, I feel, didn't satisfy the DRC's request to meet to come up with an optimal solution. We were told what was going to happen. We weren't given any sort of, hey, let's negotiate, let's talk together. The owner has not been forthcoming during the entire process. The DRC ignored all the surrounding neighborhood and neighborhood chairman associations input. The DRC said privacy doesn't matter, even though it's 12 feet in the air. And 3 minutes again to defend my rights, because we did it twice because it was so much fun. And then the owner said a real unkind things about us, and we weren't even allowed to rebut. It was really, really frustrating. It was not a good experience. Next slide. So then I watched your guys' meeting on the drive-through of the In-N-Out Burger and the Starbucks over there on Baseline. Ms. Kuby came up with saying, I want y'all to try to talk and communicate. So I saw that and I'm like, we need to talk and communicate before we try to go to the city council. So on February 21st, we came up with another meeting. We went along with the contractor for Lewis's, along with Robbie, Aaron, and Ryan from the city planning over to Cartel. I called in because I was working. The owner didn't attend the meeting and he didn't call into didn't call into the meeting. And this was an effort to try to avoid coming to talk to y'all. The contractor then responded to us saying, oh, we're not going to make any changes, not a decision maker. And they used concretenetwork.com as a baseline to come up with a 270-foot deck. And he sent a little letter. Concretenetwork.com recommends this for a ground patio, not one that's 12 feet in the air. I think the contractor misunderstood what he was trying to convey. It was still the same large size, same design for the second hearing. No neighborhood input was accepted, and this is why we're coming to you. Next slide. So is this okay for future Tempe? You know, and what we got going on? No social distancing in my backyard. That's what's going to look like right there. My yard's where the little white one is right there. I'll have no privacy. It does not fit into the immediate neighborhood character. There's definitely an entitlement, not a neighborly feeling, and animosity from the owner next door because the deck is a want, not a need. The owner didn't follow the DRC's recommendation, did not attend any meetings with the neighbors. As I mentioned, I only met the owner, Lori Lewis, once when I let her borrow my lawnmower. So DRC is making key decisions about residential Tempe without voting input or guidance from General Plan 2040 and the DRC and DRC Planning Department. I felt like they really they favor the developers of longtime citizens. I mean, I didn't even know what quasi-judicial was, and who am I going to call and ask? I had asked someone from the neighborhood. It almost was like we need some sort of ambassador to help us, because you know I feel we need to be valued too as Tempe citizens. I'm hoping that you listen to us and understand how important it is. I love Tempe and I want to continue to enjoy my backyard and my privacy. So I'm asking you to vote to overturn the DRC use permit, the 270-foot second story party deck at 921 South Roosevelt Street. Thank you. And I've got Kathy Palmer who's hopefully going to be on right now.
Thank you, Karen. And I will now turn it over to Kathleen Palmer.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Kathleen Palmer, 925 South Roosevelt Street, and I am the next door neighbor of the Lewis property on the south side. I've lived in Tempe for 57 years, and I've lived at this residence for 41 years continuously. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council, for this opportunity to speak. I'm here to oppose the use permit PL 190295 and ask the city to reverse the approval of the Design Review Commission. I am opposed to the second level large rooftop open air deck and outdoor staircase that is the setback in my house. Seeing if we're lined up with the slides.
We're trying to fix that. Hang on one second. You could still talk. We're going to try to fix it.
Okay, well, you'll have to do the slides when I.
Yep, we will.
And I'm also here to convey the problems and irregularities we've encountered with the use permit process and subsequent public hearings. However, I would like to say up front that as difficult as this has been for Karen and myself, throughout this process, everyone involved has been polite and courteous and helpful mostly, and especially the city employees. So thank you. Next slide. Please.
Hang on one sec. If you can hang on, we're trying to bear with us.
Okay. Okay, that looks good.
I think we're getting there.
Okay, with this slide is where I talk about why this permit is wrong. My home and backyard is my sanctuary, like most people. This open air deck is an invasion of privacy and it's intrusive and overbearing. It's too close and it's too big. Privacy is an elusive concept, but everyone needs it. Privacy is the ability of an individual or group to seclude themselves and thereby express themselves selectively. And another way of putting it, privacy is essential to who we are as human beings. It gives us a space to be ourselves without judgment, allows us to think freely without discrimination, and it is an important element of giving us control over who knows what about us. This is not about Mr. Lewis wanting to spy on us, and I don't think he does. I think he wants to feel private too. Rather, it's about how I feel intruded on when someone is on the deck and staircase, and whoever it is being able to see everything in my yard, looking down there, whether they want to or not. And it will be noisy at times. It's also setting a negative precedent and out of character for this neighborhood. Contrary to what Mr. Namila presented, there really isn't any large open air decks on properties in this neighborhood. Yes, there are homes with second stories and some have modest balconies. It is opposed by almost all the neighbors we talk to, and the neighbors don't want a feature like this next to their own properties. It's an old neighborhood with predominantly single-story, single-family homes. The staircase will be very noisy. It's very unattractive and unsightly. They put it on my side because they don't want to see it. I don't want to see it either. There's also an encroachment on the setback and the Palmer property. This deck is a want, not a need, and that's according to basically Brett himself. Next slide, please. This is the south elevation facing my property. The rooftop patio deck is 10 feet high, 18 feet long, and 15 feet wide, 270 square feet. It's directly across from my patio and back door. The outdoor staircase is 6 feet from the property in the setback. Next slide, please. This is the view from my rooftop of the Lewis property. At 10 feet high. It shows a simulated unobstructed view of the neighbor's property from an open air deck on the roof. It is quite an expansive view of the property, 150 feet. As you can see, these properties are very long and deep, 200 feet, but narrow, only 50 feet wide. It is an old lot style. Today's homes are required to be much wider. Next slide. This is another simulated view of my yard from their deck and staircase. There is nothing blocking their view. Next slide, please. This is the view from my back door and patio as it is right now. Next slide. This is a photo plus graphics describing how the deck is seen from my patio and the problems of privacy, invasiveness, and noise from their rooftop deck and outdoor staircase. The views are unobstructed on the west end and the staircase where they are closest to my house and patio. The west end is open and not screened. Noise is unobstructed. There is nothing preventing them to spill out onto the rest of the roof. Next slide. This is a history of meetings with the Lewis and their contractor. It's a timeline of communications and hearings. It starts with September 1st, 2018, when Miss Lori Lewis purchases the property, and ends with the last meeting on February 24th, 2020, between Mr. Namila and Karen and I. The Lewises did not attend. Next slide. Also, Mr. Namila's subsequent email rejecting all my suggestions and requests to have at least remove the staircase from my side and put it at the rear of the house. I told them the staircase was a deal breaker for me. It demonstrates that I have been openly communicating with Mr. Lewis from the beginning and Mr. Namila during the use permit process. Next slide. How the process went wrong and failed the neighborhood neighbors, the next door neighbors, and the neighborhood at large. And I have a little story. Not so long ago, Michael lived next door to Karen on the north side. He decided to build a house at the rear of the property. Michael spoke to his adjacent neighbors first and showed them his house plan. His plan included a rooftop open-air deck with an outdoor staircase, just like the Lewis deck. Long story short, all three of his adjacent neighbors told him they didn't like the rooftop deck and they were against it. So Michael just said, okay, no problem, I won't build the rooftop deck. That was that. No involvement with the city, no public hearings. He built a nice little house and he is still good friends with all his neighbors. It would have been nice if the Lewises would have come to us first. Maybe then we could have avoided this long drawn out process. Brett never told us about the plans of the deck before sending out the use permit hearing notice. They never asked us what we wanted or how we felt about the deck. For 3 in-person meetings, only Brett Lewis or Danny Demina came. They did not have the authority to make a decision. Only Lori Lewis, the owner, could do that. And she never communicated with Karen and I during this process. Every meeting they came with firm plans. They had already made a decision, and it appeared they weren't going to change them based on talking to us. That is not working with the neighbors, so in my opinion, they failed to meet the requirement of the continuance. Next slide, please. The city planners were all polite and helpful to us, but again, as Karen said, it felt like they paid all deference and support to the Lewises and Mr. Namila, not Karen and I. So the process seemed to support the requesters and not the longtime residents and homeowners. I think it would be helpful if there was a city employee who acts as an advocate for those neighbors who oppose the use permit and were most affected by it, like Karen and I. Neighbors did not receive the use permit notice in a timely fashion, only 2 weeks before the hearing. But most importantly, the case documents were made available until 1 week before the hearing. It should be at least 2 weeks, in my opinion, and be available the same time as the public hearing mailer. It is not enough time to prepare for the hearing and make sure all the neighbors are involved and understand what's at stake. Plus, the city website is nearly impossible to find or search for these documents. You really have to work at it. Shouldn't have to call the city planners to find it. The description of this use permit and what they are building is misleading, not at all accurate. A walk deck does not sound like a large rooftop open-air patio deck that is 511 square feet, 35 feet long, and 15 feet wide. That's all it said, second level walk deck. No other description or size. All the neighbors thought it was just a 3-foot walkway or just didn't understand it, so they ignored it. 3 minutes is not enough to speak when addressing the use permit at the public hearing. Your average citizen is not familiar with doing these kinds of things, navigating a city bureaucracy and addressing a quasi-legal commission to protect your property or neighborhood. It's a first for me, and I had a lot to learn. And it is wrong and unfair not to allow for rebuttals or questions after your 3 minutes. I had a total of 6 minutes at 2 hearings with no chance to address the commission to set the record straight when people made wrong statements or misrepresented Karen, myself, our properties, or our neighborhood. At the first Hughes Pimmer hearing, January 14th, the DRC would most likely have voted at least 5-2 against approval. But Chairman Lyons liked the project, so he encouraged the applicant to take a continuance as he knew the panel would vote against it. I don't understand if that is legal or not. The continuance was contingent on the Lewis's working with the neighbors. However, the Lewis's failed to meet the requirements of the continuance because the owner did not participate or communicate with us at all. They did not send someone who could make a decision with us in the meeting. In addition, Mr. Lewis and Mr. Namila came with changes they had already decided on, and it seemed they only came to explain them to me. I offered suggestions, but there was no real negotiating. I was willing to compromise on the deck, but I told them the staircase was a deal breaker for me. I was very clear about that. The DRC are the deciding authority, and the general view of citizens in this city is that the city council just rubber stamps their decision. That is wrong. The DRC are not elected and are not really city employees. They don't have to answer to the citizens. I don't think that is fair in the process. It just encourages the appeals process so you can finally get more than 3 minutes to talk to an elected official and set the record straight. And last slide. Oh, I guess I goofed. Next slide. How this could be fixed. Remove the staircase from the side and put it on the back of the house. Make the deck smaller to a more modest size. Screen in the west end. Maybe plant very large trees on the side of the house by the deck. They must be permanent, tall, with dense foliage and evergreen, or better yet, no deck. Thank you very much. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you, Kathleen and Karen, for your presentations. And I will now turn over to the applicant. Is Danny Nemela or Lori Lewis, are you available? I think you guys are. So can you go ahead and I hand it over to Danny and to Lori, or Danny go first and Lori, either way.
Sure, this is Danny Nemela, and I can go first here. And I do have a PDF PowerPoint too, wondering if that could be pulled up.
We are getting that for you.
Awesome.
Okay, there you go.
All right, thank you. So I'm Danny Nemela with Ardan Construction. We are the contractor hired by the Lewises. Just wanted to give a little bit of background on this project. So you could go to the next slide.
Hang on a second. Bear with us.
No problem.
There you go.
Thank you. So just wanted to thank you guys for hearing us this evening, and just wanted to do a brief overview of the project. So this is a remodel of the existing residence, and the Lewises would like to add the second story walk deck to their home here. You could go to the next slide.
We're trying, hang on.
So this is just the site plan of the property. It shows the yard overall. And then we are planning on doing an addition on the rear of the property as shown. You could move to the next slide. So the top picture you see there, this was the original plan that we were, that the Lewises would have liked to have done. We were going to have a walk deck basically above the new addition area. And the approximate size was going to be 15 feet wide by 35 feet long. And then after submitting this to the City of Tempe and going through the first use hearing, we did hear the neighbors' concerns there. And so we did make some changes to address some of their concerns. So the first change that we did was to reduce the size of the walk deck and kept it on the rear half of the home of the addition to maximize the privacy. You can move to the next slide. So we did meet with the neighbors. So after the DRC hearing on the 14th and listening to the concerns that the neighbors did bring up, the DRC board did give us the option of either just having them vote on the approval of the project or granting a continuance so we could meet further with the neighbors. So we did ask for the continuance, and after receiving that continuance, we did work on setting up a meeting with both neighbors. One of the neighbors did block their communication with us, and the other neighbor was willing to meet with us. And during that meeting that we had with her, she just simply stated to us that she was in opposition to the walk deck and would like us to consider removing it altogether. So we didn't feel like that it was a desirable outcome. We did make the following changes to address their concerns. Next slide. So these were the concerns that the neighbors had, as you had heard tonight, that the deck was too large. It'll accommodate a large group of people, or it would be considered a party deck. There's also, the other concern was loss of privacy and noise concerns for the backyards to the north and south neighbors. And a third concern was light shining from the walk deck into the neighboring windows. So a few solutions that we proposed was to reduce the size of the walk deck, and we removed half of that closest to the neighboring home to provide some more distance between her home and the walk deck. We did add some screening to the staircase in both sides of the walk deck, and this does prevent any line of sight into the neighboring homes. And I will show that in a following picture. And we also propose to keep the staircase lighting low and below the screening. That way there won't be any light infiltration or into the neighboring yards as well. And then we did propose, as well as the neighbors had pointed out in their presentation, that we are willing to add one additional course of the cinder blocks to both the north and south walls. And then also are presenting to use concrete or wood stair treads instead of metal to keep the staircase quieter. And then all parties, they can plant additional trees and landscaping as desired for additional screening and privacy. So this is just an aerial view of the property in question. As you can see, the area in blue, that is where the walk deck would be. It's towards the rear half of the home, rear half of the addition. And the area in green, that's a part of the addition that we'll be doing. That will be additional living space. Next slide. So one concern that the neighbors did have is privacy concerns. As you can see in these couple photos, these pictures were taken just at normal height. And I'm standing in the Lewis's backyard, and without being up on any type of ladder or any kind of elevated platform, there is, somewhat, you can see into the neighbors' homes through their windows there. So our thought was just even with people in the backyard, adding that additional course of cinder blocks would help maintain some privacy there. Next slide. This is just the front of the home, the west elevation. It'll be kind of more of a modern style home that we'll be remodeling the home to. Next slide. This is the east elevation, which shows the rear of the property. There also is just an aerial depiction of that walk deck in question. There's going to be room for some seating up there, and just for enjoyment of that open air. Next slide. This would be the north elevation. And as you can see, there is privacy screening on top of that walk deck. It is extended high enough to where even a person standing on, in that walk deck area would not have any direct lines of sight into either the north or the south yards. Next slide. This is the drawings for the south elevation. As you can see, the staircase will be going up there. We did add some screening both on the staircase itself and the landing. And that is also we did extend the screening past the landing there to the left. And there also is going to be a barrier there between the walk deck and the roof. That way there isn't any way that, people would be able to stand on the rear half of that or the front half of that looking into neighbors' yards. It's just going to be, it'll completely screen that whole walk deck from both the north and the south yards there. Next slide. These are just some photos of what we are envisioning the walk deck to be like. We are going to have some planting and vegetation, planted around the top of the walk deck. That picture in the lower right-hand corner is a style of screening that we are proposing. It is going to be a permanent solution. It's not going to be something that's going to be removable, and our plan is to use a type of material that is going to withstand the weather here. Next slide. So I just wanted to point out in this area, in that neighborhood, there are all the blue addresses there. Those are all second story, either second story buildings, or they have a second story balcony. And you could scroll through the next handful of slides. These are just pictures that I took of from the street of different balconies and second story walk decks in the area. Just want to show that it's not uncommon for that corner of the neighborhood. And with that, I would like to turn over to Lori, and she can share her thoughts as well.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. One of the beautiful attributes of this home was the size of the lot. The home itself is just over 950 square feet, small and outdated. At the present time, it is unlivable due to a burst pipe, which the remediation team had to come in and strip the walls to the studs and demolish the only functioning bathroom. So remodeling is a must. Our plans entail using some of the backyard to expand the size of the home. In an attempt to regain some of the outside living space that would be taken by the addition, we designed a terrace on the roof. During the Development Review Commission meetings, the adjoining neighbors, Karen and Kathy, expressed their concerns regarding our plans for a rooftop terrace. During this process, we heard their concerns and made design modifications to address those concerns. The neighbors were opposed to the size of the terrace, so we reduced the size by half. Concerns were expressed regarding the privacy of the neighbors from the terrace. Privacy panels were added on the north side and south side of the patio to prevent any view of the neighbor's house from the patio. In addition, a privacy panel will extend all the way up the stairwell, which will be incorporated with the patio panels. Final materials have not been selected at this time, but the pictures that Danny showed you reflect the privacy panels. In addition, for additional privacy, we opted to add another row of cinder block to the block walls on each neighbor's side for additional privacy of the ground. Both neighbors have the opportunity to plant plants on their side of the property as well as we do. So we didn't address that because each party can do that on their own. In addition, for additional privacy, we opted to, oh, okay, we did that. Okay, concerns were expressed regarding the noise from the stairwell. First of all, this is a single family home, not an apartment complex or office building. There'll be minimal traffic going up and down the stairs. However, we did offer to research and use the most noise reducing products such as wood treads with rubber inserts in order to accommodate the neighbors' concerns. When the neighbors to the south expressed that there might be overhead lighting from the stairwell that would be shining into her bedroom window, we addressed this issue by using built-in low lights at the treads in the contained stairwell area. We have throughout this process listened and modified our plans to address the concerns of the neighbors. Keep in mind that each of these modifications do have a financial burden for us. We feel strongly that the design changes we proposed address their concerns. My son, Brett, who will be living in this house, is a young professional who has worked and lived in the neighborhood for many years, just a few blocks away. He will be a good neighbor, considerate of the unique and historic aspects of Tempe. Brett would like to live in his dream home and immerse himself in the community. We are asking for a modest-sized terrace that does take into account the privacy concerns of our neighbors and provides him with the opportunity to enjoy possibly the stars at night, holiday fireworks, and the beauty of the winter nights. I also want to state that we bought this house not knowing who our neighbors were going to be. We didn't assume that they were partiers. We did not assume certain things. And at each meeting, they keep talking about being a frat house, Airbnb, and whatnot. They are assuming who we are, and that's not who we are. This is just a single family home for my son. I went to every DRC meeting, and the one meeting I couldn't attend before the meeting, I was out of town and unavailable to attend that meeting on February 21st. So I do appreciate you listening to my comments. That's it.
Thank you very much. With that, I will now turn to our city clerk to see if there's anyone that submitted a public comment card or they want it read into the record.
Mr. Mayor, I do know that you have received several emails both in support and opposing the project. We do have 2 public speaker requests, one to be read into the record and the others live online, whichever you'd like to take first.
Let's do the live online and then we'll read the one for the public record.
That'll be Philip Yates.
All right, Mr. Yates, please state your name and place of residence for the record.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Philip Yates. I live at 320 South Roosevelt Street. I'm just down the street from where the Lewis residence is, and I attended all of the DRC meetings. And I just have to say that this is a horrible addition to a house. This is something that will turn into exactly what it is called, a party deck, and it will turn into a fraternity dwelling for anybody that likes to just go up on top of a roof and drink beer and maybe toss beers inside of the next door neighbor. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, this is just going to turn into a big party house, and it's going to really, really impose on the neighbors of the Lewis residents. Whenever there is any kind of a football game and people like to go up on top of the roof and watch the fireworks and whatnot, and of course they're going to be cheering stuff on. Nobody wants to have like beer cans tossed into their backyard. Nobody wants to see a party going on top of a house next door to where they live. And I can't see the slides that you're looking at or had shown prior to me speaking. But in any case, you can see into the bedroom, you can see into the bathroom of the next door neighbors' houses, and that is just not right. You should not be able to look inside of somebody's bedroom or their bathroom at any time, unless it's your own residence. But this is in case it's just a terrible idea for the area, and this is welcoming to Airbnbs, and the way that it even looked was just a terrible, terrible display of what would be something that would be nice to have seen from the street. The walk deck, the stairways, it just is very, very unattractive. I didn't hear anybody say positive things except for the people that had proposed it that were good things to say. There was nothing, no praise at all that I hear for this except for the people that actually proposed it, and that's just a shame. To it have got to this point to where we have actually just had to say, no, we're not going to take this anymore because the DRC isn't listening to us, is a shame. We have to listen to the people when they come to these meetings and speak. You have to listen to the people that are talking into these mics, if you can hear me, and look at them if you can. But take them seriously. Take us seriously when we speak to you, even if it is just for 3 minutes. We are serious, and we mean it when we say, hey, we want to be heard. If you only have 3 minutes to speak to the city council or a DRC meeting, that's really, really a shame, especially if you're a representative for a neighborhood association, as I am. And this is just not a cool thing to do to anybody. We really, really need to oppose this. Everybody should oppose this for so many reasons. I really am speaking against this proposal, and with that, I'll excuse myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And now I turn to our city clerk to read into the record a statement.
Mayor, I have a statement from Linda Knudsen, Tempe resident. She writes, since Karen Morrissey, the neighbor to the north of the Lewis residence, brought the use permit request to my attention, I have watched and listened to the recorded DRC meetings from January 14th and February 11, as well as walked through the neighborhood to look at the 7 homes within our neighborhood association that were listed by the contractor of the project as examples of similar projects. What I found is as follows. At the first DRC meeting, 5 commissioners were not going to approve the project. They pointed out that there was no buy-in from the neighbors. At that time, they had received 12 public comments opposing the plan and 0 supporting it. The number opposing it has now gone up with more public comment gathered. They were concerned about privacy issues, possibilities of a large number of people gathering on the deck, and no ability to buffer the noise, and simply that it was not compatible with surrounding homes. Commissioner Cassano pointed out the purpose of the deck is to allow for an opened patio seating area, but still allow for an open and irrigated backyard of 4,500 square feet. He then said if you take 500 square feet away by putting the deck on the ground, you still have 4,000 square feet of the backyard. However, Chairman Lyman, who appeared to be the only one supporting the project during that meeting, reminisced at length how great it was to be on a friend's roof during college to watch fireworks and sip a beverage. And somehow Mr. Lewis was given the opportunity to, number 1, work on the project, come up with some modifications, and be able to appear before the DRC in the future, or have the vote done that night. Obviously, Mr. Lewis chose to try again. The 7 homes in the neighborhood with supposedly similar decks couldn't be further from the truth. Each of those homes has either an enclosed second story or walking decks or actual landings, or 4-foot walking areas without room for a group of people to gather. Finally, at the DRC meeting on February 11th, it was pointed out that this gathering deck is a want, not a need, that the same type of gathering area could be built on the ground instead of 10 to 12 feet above the ground. However, it was approved with a 4-2 vote. 1 commissioner had not been at the original meeting. The commissioners who voted for it felt that it was better now because it was only 270 square feet. It still is 10 to 12 feet above the ground, and the outside stairway is 5 feet away from the neighbor to the south. The privacy issue has still not been addressed. If there's ever been a time when we, who are lucky enough to have a backyard, have found that a backyard is our sanctuary, it is now. When you vote tonight, please imagine Please imagine going out into your own backyard, into that private sanctuary, and then imagine having 270 square feet gathering deck that is 10 to 12 feet above the ground, looking into your own yard. I hope that all you will vote to overturn the DRC's approval of the project. Thank you, Linda Knutson, Chair of the Wilson Art and Garden Neighborhood Association.
Thank you. With that, we don't have any other cards, so now I will look my notes. I'll close that public hearing of the meeting, and then I will call upon Karen and Kathleen to have a response and a summary statement, if you will, and then following them, we'll have Danny and Lori respond to the public comments and the statement. So first, Karen and Kathleen.
Thank you for hearing our case. As I know, this is long and probably boring, but it's everything to me. I've spent 30 years, working really hard every day, going into cubicles and offices to pay for my house, so then I can come home and enjoy my backyard. I really don't want to hear a bunch of parties or people, like talking on the deck all the time. I don't want to hear what's going on in their living room in my backyard. I don't think it's fair for anybody. So please, if you can vote to overturn the DRC, that would be great. I haven't ever seen the DRC give so many chances, and I thought that was very unusual, and then given the set of instructions that were not followed. So please, if you can consider that as well. I'm gonna give it to Kathy.
Okay.
Hi, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to say at the first meeting that we had, that was, the continuance was based on, I brought a lot of suggestions, and I made it very clear that it wasn't just that I was against the deck, that I would have compromised on the deck if they would have moved the staircase. So I was really clear about that. And I had drawings and I had photographs, and I tried to convince them to understand what it was like from where I stood, because no one in this process but me has ever been in my backyard to see this. Not the neighbors, not the DRC, not the city council. And that's okay, but I tried to get them to imagine that. The screens that I talked about don't sound permanent. If they were a permanent part of the building, that would mean they're 6 feet tall. But they could be changed by the next tenant, if there ever is a next tenant. Once the staircase and the deck is there, it's there for good. Now, people's lives are not predictable. Maybe Brett gets a job in a different city and he rents the house. Now I'm dealing with new people who I don't even know, we don't know anything about, and I'm not assuming anything, but those kind of things could happen. So I want to also emphasize, I never called it a party deck. I never called it a frat house thing. And I never called it an Airbnb. And this is something that other people see, but that's not the point for me. It's one person on the roof, 2 people, 5 people, 10 people. It's still an invasion of privacy. It could be. And I just wanted to clarify that. I never called it that. And I want also to clarify that I had a very good relationship with Brett up to this point, and very friendly, and I looked forward to him as being a neighbor. And I hope that when he moves in, that we will be good neighbors. But I also want to say that we are also, not only after this decision is made, we are going to have to suffer through 4 or 5 months of a demolition of the existing house, and then the addition and all the finished building. So, we are the ones who are experiencing things here. And I think it's only fair that we are considered, Karen and I, but myself especially, because the deck is all on my side, the staircase is all on my side. And that's, I hope that you'll see our point of view, look at the photographs again, and try and imagine that this is your yard, and make a decision. I hope it goes our way. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we are going to have Danny and Lori, if you guys would like to make comments and a summary statement as well to wrap up.
Danny, did you have anything?
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate that, Brett and Lori, with Brett being a current resident of Tempe, that he does want to be a good neighbor, and that is his intent. Just want to reiterate that, and like we have listened to the concerns and made some changes to accommodate those, and I guess I don't have any other further thoughts.
Okay. Unfortunately, with any remodel in any location, you're going to have a disturbance in the neighborhood with some type of construction. And hopefully, the construction will be done on a timely basis and won't be too bad of a hardship on the neighbors, which we it's going to be noisy at times. I understand. We are using the existing house and adding onto it and gutting the rest of the inside, what's left of it. So the entire house is not being totally demolished. And even though the size of the yards are beautiful, and like I said, that's what attracted us to the house, I think whether you're standing in the backyard or you're on a walk deck, you're going to hear what's going on in your neighbor's backyard, whether you're on the deck or you're on the ground. It's just the nature of the size of the lots. And I mean, Brett has not had any problems with his current neighbors. He has a great relationship with all of his neighbors. He lives 2 blocks away. And hopefully he can continue this when he moves into this new house for himself.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Before I'm getting ready now to ask my colleagues, I see a hand up from Vice Mayor Kuby. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I have to say I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated for the neighbors. The DRC clearly had issues with the use permit, and they granted a continuance, and they asked for the owner to meet with the neighbors, but that really didn't happen, as Karen and Ms. Palmer, Kathleen has shown. And I note that Ms. Lewis is here tonight, the owner, so I'm glad of that. Really, I appreciate that. And I understand the owner has made concessions. They added screening, they added a few layers of cinder block on both sides, and they reduced the size of the deck. But still, this is for a use permit, and the same type of gathering area could be built on a very expansive ground, over 4,500 square feet, I believe, of ground, with far less impact on the neighbors. And we know the neighbors offered concessions too, but these concessions were not considered, as Kathleen Palmer demonstrated to us in her PowerPoint. But what we have to do here, it's a quasi-judicial matter, and we can only consider the appellant's arguments and the city's established use criteria. So let's focus on the use criteria. So criterion 4 is compatibility with existing surrounding structures and uses. I was really struck by the comments that Carla read of Wilson Arts resident Linda Knudsen. She talked about the 7 homes in the neighborhood with supposedly similar decks. I just want to repeat this because I think it's important that these 7 homes that were cited as compatible have either an enclosed second story, or their walking decks are just landings, or their walking areas have far less room, so a group couldn't really gather. And then, as Karen Morrissey told us tonight, the entire block between Wilson and Roosevelt is all single story, right? And so we're supposed to talk about, with that criterion, compatibility with existing surrounding structures and uses. And Karen also mentioned the proposed deck is mid-block, and it's only accessible from the outside. Or in other examples in the neighborhood, those 7 examples, the decks are double lots on corners. So I note that both neighbors adjacent to both sides of this property are in opposition, and I think these appellants have shown that the rooftop open air patio deck is not compatible with existing surrounding structures and uses. So that's one criterion that I found to be not met. And then criterion 2 is nuisance arising from the emission of odor, dust, gas, noise, vibration, smoke, heat, or glare at a level exceeding that of ambient conditions. So we don't truly know if this will be violated. We can't really say for sure, but there's a lot of concern here from the neighbors. the outside stairway is still 5 feet away from the neighbor to the south. And Kathleen Palmer had said she'd be willing to consider if the stairway could just be moved so it wasn't so close to her property. Now keep in mind, these are very narrow lots. So I believe they've made a strong case that there could be noise and vibration if the roof deck is tended to be used, even, I'm not talking about parties, but just used as a place for recreation. There's bound to be noise and there's bound to be vibration. So I find that a criterion is very strong. So, you know, I think that they've made a very strong case using the permit criteria, which again is the only thing we can consider tonight. And the strongest arguments, as I mentioned, relate to the two criteria. Criteria 2, nuisance arising from emissions of odor, dust, gas, noise, vibration, or glare, and the compatibility with existing, and put in quotes, surrounding structures and uses. That is the strongest case I find. And ultimately, the reason why, and I'll get back to my point about being frustrated, is that owner could have avoided so much trouble. I'm sure there's been a lot of expense to the contractor, to Ms. Lewis, so we could have avoided that expense. And also the neighborhood heartache by just communicating and speaking with the neighbors from the outset. So I will be voting to approve the appeal tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go next to Councilmember Adams and then Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Councilmember Adams.
Yes, I agree with what Lauren said, and so I'm not going to repeat everything she said because you said it so well. I have the exact same concerns too, and the neighbors were not communicated with is also a big frustration for me, and I will be approving the appeal also this evening. Thank you, Lauren, for summarizing it so well.
All right, Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a quick question for our staff, if that's possible. I'm not sure who's there, if it's Ryan. And it's in regards to the screening that we were talking about and the permanency of the screening. If I'm wondering, does that run with the permit? Because I do appreciate the fact that if the residence is sold in a year or 2 years, that there's no conditions that screening has to remain. Is there a condition that screening has to remain with that house as long as it's in existence?
Councilmember Arredondo Savage, this is Ryan LeVake. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can?
Yes. Yeah, with the condition of approval, when there were modifications made, those screening requirements were a part of that use permit approval. So any further changes or expansions or modifications to the specific design elements of the second-story patio would require or trigger a new use permit requirement, a permission to make those type of modifications.
So somebody couldn't buy it and then take it down
Correct.
later? Okay, I just want to clarify on that. So those definitely have to stay. And I guess the one thing I was kind of wondering about too is there was some mention of landscaping, but basically just being an opportunity, but no discussion or anything worked out in regards to landscaping. I don't know, Ryan, if you remember any of that conversation or why that maybe wasn't a little bit more prominent within the discussion at the DRC.
Sure. There was discussion about landscaping or providing trees in a hedge-like manner. I know the property owner to the north was not considering the trees because they were just in opposition to the request. I don't know how the property owner to the south felt about it, but I know there was some initial concerns of just straight opposition for the deck and not considering a compromise such as a tree buffer.
Okay, got
But
that.
that could
Understood.
be
Thank you.
considered if the applicant were to be able to accommodate that within the setbacks of the side of the property.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it seems reasonable, I think, to want to put some buffering there with some landscaping and being a good neighbor both ways. I certainly understand that. So thank you for that. And I guess my other comment too, Mayor, would be I really, it always is bothersome, I think, as a council member when you hear people concerned about our processes. And I understand and realize that they're not perfect by any means. And we're all human. The DRC are human, and they do the best job that they can do. And I certainly do appreciate them and their work. And I think that everybody on the council and the DRC definitely supports all of our citizens within the city of Tempe. So I know this is hard, and I think that the council, I think Vice Mayor brought up some really good points in regarding the use criteria and what's around there. And I guess I would just have to say I understand where she's coming from, but I have a tendency to disagree and kind of look at it in the other light too. So with what I've heard and with what I've seen and driving through the neighborhood, I will be denying the appeal tonight. So thank you for that.
Next, I'm going to go to Councilmember Keating.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm here in person, so I can participate.
Microphone.
Still can't hear me? There we go. Hey, I found a microphone that works. That's great. Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you very much to the appellants and the applicant for your robust presentations. And something I did want to kind of reiterate and back up on was Councilmember Arenado Savage's point that DRC is a group of professionals that deeply cares about this community, and it's not it is a thankless job, as is much of public service, and they put themselves out there to help the council and guide the council in some of the tough decisions we have to make. So I appreciate their service, and I don't like to overrule their decisions. I think it should take somewhat extraordinary circumstances. There's certain legal avenues that are criteria that have to be met for us in order to do that. And something said about they were given a continuance, and that seemed to be somewhat underhanded. But the fact of the matter is we do that kind of stuff all the time. We often send back applicants and neighbors to try to work something out so it doesn't come to some sort of debate or a controversial or divisive issue before the council. So that's something that this body utilizes quite a bit. I know the DRC does too as well, because they want to give everybody an opportunity to come together and try to alleviate everyone's concerns around a particular project, or in this case, a remodel. To me, it seems, looking at it from what I got in the packet and what the briefings that we've had on this, is it seems to me that the applicant made several concessions in order to try to make this property remodeling more amicable to their neighbors, which I do appreciate. And it kind of, to me, boils down to property rights and process. And I'm a big supporter of property rights. Obviously, you have to be right to live in this society. But I'm also a supporter of the process that we have in place and the people that we have entrusted to help guide us into that process. So for that reason, I don't find, I have to respectfully disagree with the Vice Mayor, I don't find that there is cause here to overrule the DRC's decision. So I will be voting to deny the appeal. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Adams has her hand up. Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make a motion to move to approve the appeal.
Before we go there, I'm going to see if there's any other comments from the rest of the council. Any comments from
Okay.
Councilmember Chin or Councilmember Navarro?
No, Mayor, thank you.
Okay. There's been a motion to approve the appeal by Councilmember Adams. Is there a second?
Mayor?
Councilmember Navarro.
No, I was just making a comment. I was just trying to look at this thing and listen to everybody and just trying to weigh it in. But I had a question. If this was a two-story house and they had an extended patio, is this a use permit? Is this a change to where they have to get a use permit? Or does it just depend on where the...
This is Ryan Levesque. Yeah, it's because the original house was a single-story house, as the request is to get a secondary level, whether it was a second-story occupancy addition or a deck, that triggers the use permit requirement. A first-floor addition would not require a use permit.
Right. And then, obviously, if they expanded and not get a, let's just say they expand their property and they don't have a two-story, but they, basically use their property wisely and have a bigger size house, what would trigger a use permit if it was just still a single story? Do you understand what I'm saying? They're just making a bigger footprint, staying within the property, single story. Would anything trigger a use permit?
Bigger footprint on the ground level would not require a use permit.
All right. And then you know, I appreciate the comments that have been made by the other council members, and it is a hard one to debate because I'm trying to look at it very critically, and the one thing that you know, the process, you know, I'm not going to disagree with the process. I'm not going to even, you know, the comments have been made about the DRC and hey, let's give it another chance. And I think Councilmember Keating was spot on saying that we do that often to see if something better comes out. And you know, sometimes something does better come out. Sometimes it doesn't. But at the end of the day, you know, you get another chance to come to the council to do this process. And I have to agree, it's not perfect sometimes, but you know, we have to support it, and we always have to try to make improvements too, and try to make changes where needed. The thing about the property is, you know, no one can predict if it's going to be a VRBO, or they're going to have parties or increased foot traffic, and what about the noise, and is the stairs going to make noise, and is the balcony going to make noise? I can't, you know, if they're going to do good construction and quality stairs, and you know, a single person going to be in there, you know, long and short of it, no one can predict that. And long and short of it, they have to be good neighbors, and they have to try to always get along. Everyone takes a chance in that neighborhood and on who their neighbor's going to be. And there's going to be changeover in that neighborhood throughout. And I do get also that the character of the neighborhood is important, and the quality of the neighborhood is important, and you want to keep that character. But you also do want to see improvement to some of those houses. I can't say specifically to that house what improvements need to be done or how it's going to be done, but yeah, looking on the map, you know, Google Map and what's going on, you know, yeah, it's got to fit the quality. And I noticed even in that neighborhood, the house to the north of the person that lives next to that neighborhood has a house that's huge next to them. I mean, it's a big footprint. And but yet, when you look on the street side, it's a single story house. And however that process worked for them, you know, they got that process through, and they utilize you know, their backyard according to what they want and needs for their house. So if they had to get a use permit to expand, I don't know. But long and short of the day is we all are trying to be a good neighborhood. So you know, some of the debate that was captured about noise and all this stuff, that's just so hard to predict. The only one thing that I had a hard time was the compatibility of it. And I know those lots are narrow, and I know they're tight to the neighbor next door, and the design is cool. And, you know, they put the barriers up so they can't see into the other neighbor's house. And that's the hard thing that I'm having a hard time with right now, because, you know, it does restrict the view into the neighbor's house. But at the same time, if I was building that property, I wouldn't put a balcony up there, because obviously I know that, and looking at that street, it's a single story house all up and down that street in that neighborhood. I'm in that area. I'm not talking about the street or two over and other houses. I'm talking about those houses. And I wish, and I don't know how the process went, but you know, whoever the owner was, and if the owner truly did show up these meetings to try to work it out and did not show up, that was an opportunity to really get this thing done, and hopefully it would have never gone to the council. So that's kind of a disappointment right there, because I think that if any neighbor that's going to move into a house in this neighborhood and is going to try to do something a little bit different, you know, granted, you're going to want to at least get some buy-in. And if you can't work with the neighbors, or if you can't work, you know, the crummy thing is, you know, you have both neighbors that basically you couldn't work with, which was hard. You know, I can understand one and the other one and make concessions. Maybe the stairwell is the concession on that, but long and short of it is that was an opportunity that was missed, and as far as I could tell. But anyways, I don't know if I can grant this property to have that second story at this point. So anyways, that's my thought.
Okay, thank you. I see Vice Mayor Kuby has her hand up, and there's been a motion to deny or to approve the appeal. Vice Mayor Kuby?
Yeah, just a couple things, responses to some of the arguments I've heard tonight. And one is about the process argument that we have a DRC that we respect, made up of citizens, and that we need to respect the process. But I mean, we also have an appeal process. And during that appeal process, as the appellants made clear, you have the opportunity to more fully present your argument. And with the PowerPoint, you have an unlimited amount of time to really make your case, and not 3 minutes, where there's a lot of pressure to get your point across in 3 minutes. So I wanted to make that point. And I agree with Joel that you know, we can't predict if it's going to become an Airbnb or a loud party place. Like, that's not really what we're focused on tonight. We need to be focused on the use criteria. And again, my focus, although I believe both 2 criteria met, criteria 4 and criteria 2, I think criteria 4 is compatibility with existing surrounding, put that in quotes, putting that air quotes, surrounding structures and uses make the strongest argument. And the last thing I want to say is that this is not denying improvements to be made to the neighborhood and to this particular house. There's 4,500 square feet in the backyard where they could build a patio deck. So it doesn't deny their right, their property right to improve their property. So, and that is a point that, that Commissioner Cassano made very clearly during the DRC. So thank you.
I want to ask the applicant, if I could ask Lori or Danny, would you be willing to have some vegetation on the north and the south side of the structure? You know, to hide some of the concerns, both of the residents on the north and the south side. Danny or Lori? I'm looking at this, adding this to maybe part of the conditions, and that might change some opinions. Danny, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. So Lori, I guess that would be a question for Lori. I know that that was in discussion, and so I think they would have to. She could respond to that.
Lori? I mean, just looking at some vegetation that could hide some of the visible structure to you know, be compatible to the fencing that you're going to have in around the deck. I'm talking on the ground floor though.
So Lori just sent me a message. Is her microphone muted?
No, have her check her phone. Oh, you muted.
But she did send a message. I'll have her check her phone. That yes, they would be willing to consider
Okay.
Vegetation there.
Okay, if we could add that, if it's okay with the council, if we could add that as a stipulation to the conditions, and seeing that we do have a motion to approve the appeal. I have not heard a second. Vice Mayor Kuby.
I mean, those conditions, we don't know if those are conditions approved by the appellants. We know that one of the real conditions she wanted was to have the staircase moved to the back of the property. So I don't know if that's a possibility. I mean, if there's going to be a real movement here and conversation, I'd even say let's continue it so they can have more conversation. But as it stands now, just putting some vegetation in will take a long time to grow isn't necessarily a resolution, especially if you don't know what the appellants think. So I second Council.
Okay. All right, there's been a motion to approve the appeal, and there's been a second. Is there any other further discussion from the council? Okay, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Councilmember Navarro. We're looking at to approve the appeal. Are you a yes or no?
Approve.
Okay. Councilmember Chin.
Nay.
Councilmember Keating.
No.
Vice Mayor Kuby.
Approve.
Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
No.
Councilmember Adams.
Approve.
And I vote no. So that motion to approve the appeal is denied. Is there a motion to deny the appeal?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
It's been moved by
Like to
Councilmember Arredondo
move-
Savage and seconded by
To deny the
Councilmember.
appeal with your conditions of vegetation being included.
Okay. There's been a motion
Landscaping, I'm sorry.
to approve, or there's been a motion to deny the appeal with the condition as stated. And there's been a second by Councilmember Keating, but I now look to Councilmember Chin. She has her hand up.
No, I was seconding.
Oh, okay. So there's been a motion and a second to deny the appeal. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Councilman Navarro,
Nay.
Councilmember Chen,
Aye.
Councilmember Keating,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kuby,
Nay.
Councilmember Arredondo Savage,
Aye.
Councilmember Adams,
No.
and I vote aye. That motion carries to deny the appeal 4-3. All right. With that, we now move to item 6A2. Thank you all for participating and for the comments. Next, we move to item 6A2 is to hold a public hearing for an appeal of the Development Review Commission's decision to deny a use permit to allow residential in the CSS district and a development plan review for the Gin Stage Tempe for a multifamily development located at 6403 South Hardy Drive. The appellant is Quarles and Brady. Per the zoning and development code, an appeal shall be limited to the issues raised in the petition and the ZDC section 6-803. Information not included in the petition is not to be considered. So tonight's public hearing is an appeal of the Development Review Commission's decision to deny a use permit to allow residential in the CSS district and a development plan review for Gin Stage Tempe for a multifamily development located at 6403 South Hardy Drive. The appellant is Quarles and Brady. I would ask the appellant of Gin Stage Tempe's attorney, Mr. Ben Graff, are you present? Are you on the phone?
I am present. I am present, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you for
Wonderful.
participating. You have an opportunity to make a presentation on behalf of the appellant.
Much, Mayor and Council. My name is Ben Graff with the law firm of Quarles and Brady, representing Gin Stage LLC, a small development company focused on multifamily. Also with me today are two outstanding architects with Perlman Architects, Tristan Kesty and also Nick Mackey, who will be available if needed for questions. Before I go any further, especially given just the novelty of this online and virtual hearing, I just want to thank the city clerk's office and Carla Reese for all the coordination for making this a very smooth process. And from planning, Obinia Kingsby has been just outstanding. He's been the planner working on this and has been attending neighborhood meetings with us and has been very responsive to both the applicant and the developer. So I just want to make those quick thank yous. I'd like to just start by stating that while this is an appeal from the January 14th Development Review Commission's decision, the way that this appeal has actually been able to function, as you will learn, is that the denial allowed for an appeal process, which then allowed for substantive discussions with the neighbors. And I will get into details with that. But as you know, since the process is limited to what was placed in the actual petition, I think it's important to note that in our petition for the appeal, we did anticipate that we would not only be having meetings with the neighbors, but would probably very commonly have some changes to the development to make it more compatible. So the changes that you hear today, although they weren't before the Development Review Commission, they were anticipated in the petition, and I think that that's an important point. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this property is at the southeast corner of Guadalupe and Hardy Drive. It's just about 1.4 gross acres. There's some unique aspects about this site. First and foremost, it's one of the few undeveloped sites in the area. It has remained vacant for decades and has really never come to fruition as a standard retail or commercial use. You'll also notice to the east, there's a strip of property, and that's the SRP station, which unfortunately for now, just from an aesthetic standpoint, does remain vacant, but also does act as a buffer from our neighbors. You'll also notice that the site is nicely tucked into an existing multifamily development. That multifamily development makes this a very compatible addition for what we're talking about. And as we get into it, the original application was for 28 condominium units on this site. The condominium units were in conformance with the zoning and also with the general plan, which states a dwelling unit density here of 25 acres. Next slide. Next slide, please. Here you'll see that the commercial shopping and services is the underlying zoning. This does anticipate and allow for a multifamily project such as condominiums. And of course, that requires a use permit and the approval of a development plan review. But there were some comments that came in that stated that the multifamily wasn't permitted here. That's not the case. It is permitted, of course, with the underlying use permit. Next paragraph, please. Or next slide. Just another perspective here that does show you that while we're surrounded by multifamily, we do have single family homes directly to our west. That's been a direct consideration. Single family homes across Guadalupe, also to the north. Next slide, please. We've gone over the beginning part of this slide, but again, this appeal has allowed for what I really see as the ideal process in any zoning application, where we had to develop a specific plan. Plan ran into some issues, obviously, with a development review commission denial. But we're able to come back to you now with some compromises that really the developer took a lot of time to agree to. And so instead of 28 units, we're coming back to 24. I'm hearing a little bit of background noise. Somebody might be making some high-end coffee or something like that. But
Deborah jackhammering, could you please?
Or whoever's eating.
It's making me hungry, but thank you very much. Appreciate it. So I'll go to the next slide. Next slide, please. So just a bit of a timeline to kind of understand how we got here today. December 18th, Perlman Architects worked with Gin Stage to file the original use permit and development plan review request. Again, that was the 28 units. On January 14th, the Development Review Commission denied the project. And this occurred despite the fact that the staff report did state that we met the general plan. We meet all code requirements, even in the original plan, so we weren't asking for any deviations or extraordinary development standards. And we did meet all the criteria for a use permit and development plan review. But this next point is key, because this is what caught, I think, everyone off guard and why the Development Review Commission probably saw the denial as appropriate in their mind. None of our team was aware of any opposition to this project until the day of the Development Review Commission. The opposition provided some written correspondence that day and attended in opposition that evening. And in fact, this project had gone so smoothly beforehand that even city staff had not recommended a neighborhood meeting take place, so one had not occurred. And so that opposition hadn't been received. And my team, my zoning team at Quarles and Brady, was brought on after the denial. And we've really just taken part, and I can't take all the credit because I have to have a client who's willing to do it. But I've taken part in leading the effort to kind of fix that prior, not necessarily misstep, but just that prior situation where we just weren't aware or weren't in communications with the neighbors. And so this has really allowed us to have some good time to do that. Next slide, please. And so that resulted in our firm filing the appeal on January 28th. Next slide, please. Next slide. And I just want to go over the legal side of this. As a lawyer, I can't help it. I just do want to state that our appeal was appropriately filed. that the appeal petition did cover the issues that are before you this evening, which is not only the request to reverse the denial, but to also consider the accommodations that we've made in the interim. And we have, of course, remained in 100% conformance with the ex parte communications. I always like to point out our team has not had any communication with the mayor or council members regarding this appeal. Next slide, please. Now, I'm going to just for a moment try to sink in an important point, which is, although we are definitely bringing to you a compromise today, a key aspect of the appeal is that the original application itself still met all of the use permit and development plan review requirements and probably should not have been denied. The original application fell within the correct density, within the correct development standards and parking. Next slide, please. We met the use permit criteria, which I will go over briefly for you. No significant increase in vehicular or pedestrian traffic. Both the original plan and the current plan will, of course, increase traffic as opposed to a vacant lot. But considering that the general plan foresees this area as having a density of up to 25 dwelling units per acre, and the underlying zoning contemplates and allows for multifamily uses with a use permit, certainly we're not beyond ambient conditions, providing for a 24 or even the original 28 unit site. Next slide, please. I don't have to go back to the prior slide, but also a good point with the original slide is that we met all parking requirements. We were not asking for any type of parking deviation. We were providing all 28 units originally with 2 garage units each, 2 garage spaces each, as well as 8 guest parking spaces. Of course, this development will not admit dust, odor, gas, noise, vibration, smoke, or heat, or even glare beyond ambient conditions. It is although the architecture is fabulous, it is a standard multifamily development that simply will not add to these issues. And you will see in a moment that our further accommodations assure this. Number 3, the development will not contribute to the deterioration of the neighborhood or the downgrading of property values. And of course, in this case, we're looking at a vacant property. And when neighbors ask me if a project is going to increase or decrease values, that's certainly not my expertise, and I'm careful not to answer that. But I will tell you that when we look at vacant, underutilized lots, those don't help property values. And these condominium units, which are coming in for ownership in this neighborhood, will certainly be a contribution to the neighborhood and not a deterioration. Next slide, please. Certainly, we have to look at whether or not the development is compatible with existing and surrounding structures and uses. And in this case, as you recall from one of the original slides, the entire site to the south and the east is encapsulated by a 30-foot tall multifamily development. Our project at its highest points is at 34 feet and is also a multifamily development. So I would certainly state it is consistent with those surrounding uses. As we will get into, our time with the neighbors has allowed us to provide further accommodations to make it more compatible with the fact that we do have single-family homes that are within sight of the project. And then number 5, we have no reason to believe that our project above any others in any way would provide for disruptive behavior. But we have also taken into account that our community areas, such as the pool, and community center should be tucked into the furthest corner of the site and away from the single family home. So we have made that accommodation as well. Next slide, please. And I do want to point out there were some items that are a part of our appeal that we just do not believe were applicable to the DRC's denial, but yet took up a lot of conversation. One is that there was a lot of conversation and reason for denying it because of concerns of Airbnb. And while I do believe that this is an important concern across all of the cities in general, it currently just is not a legal factor for denying a use permit or development plan review. These are slated for individual condo ownership, and the whether or not an Airbnb use could ever be affiliated with it, we don't know. But it certainly can't be the grounds for denying it, or should not be. There was a substantial amount of discussion about the parking being deficient. And this is a key point. While the discussion was about the site's parking being deficient, the site's parking met all development code standards. We provided 2 garage spaces for each individual unit, and we provided 3 more than the required minimum 5 guest parking spots in the original application. Next slide. And finally, there was a lot of discussion about this project creating negative impact on traffic, which I've noted. But even the vice chair did note that it probably wouldn't do any favors to the neighborhood to approve a busy retail or grocery site because that would be much more intense traffic. So I think we've clarified both at that hearing and we will at this hearing that a negative traffic impact is certainly not the case for the now 24-unit condominium project. Next slide, please. So I'd like to go over some, thank you. I'd like to go over some of our neighborhood outreach. So what would have been the point of our appeal had we not taken the time to meet with the neighbors? I think that would have been an egregious mistake and not one that I would have been popular to bring before this council. So it's important to know that immediately after our petition, we basically first notified the city that we were not in a rush. We wanted to do this correctly. Gin Stage is the underlying property owner. This is not a deal in the workings or in the makings. We are the property owner, and we wanted to do this right. And at the time, we were offered a March City Council appeal hearing, and we elected for the April hearing to provide enough time for both meetings with the neighborhood and for making changes to the plans. We didn't want anyone to be rushed. On the 11th, we sent out our first notification letter of our own volition. These weren't, these outreach processes are certainly not required by the city at this point, but they were required to do the job right. And so we mailed out the notification letters and we invited neighbors to the first neighborhood meeting for this project. And so on the 26th, we held an in-person neighborhood meeting. We had 15 participants. I will say honestly that the majority of those participants came in opposition. But what we were showing them were the original plans. We were allowing them for the first time to digest those original plans and to tell us specifically what they didn't like. We had a good number of folks there that said they were opposed, but if you could make X, Y, and Z changes, we'd feel a lot better about it. And then we had about 3 participants that day that were actually in favor of the project as well. Next slide, please. So following that, we actually had a really informed list of what to do. We knew there were concerns about the 28-unit density and that they would like to see some reduction in the number of units if possible. There were discussions of the fact that even though we met the code for guest parking, that there could still be overflow. Is there something we could do about that? And the other comments that came through is that some of the design aspects seemed a little industrial or a little too modern or gray tones. And we took those into account as well. And we created a new set of plans, which are before you tonight. The date stamp on those plans, should there be a motion to approve the appeal with the new plans, are date stamped March 30th, 2020. And we filed those revised plans with a new narrative to city staff. And then we took the responsibility of informing the neighbors of those changes. Now, as you know, COVID-19 was front and center at this point. We worked very closely with city staff on the best way to do this. And so the first thing we did is I probably sent out the most substantive neighborhood letter I've sent in my career because we wanted to make sure that the neighbors had every aspect of the new design. We provided a detailed letter, a detailed chart showing all of the changes, and before and after exhibits for the neighborhood as well. Additionally, we scheduled and invited the neighborhood to a virtual neighborhood meeting on April 20th. And I could still be corrected, but from our discussions with city staff, we believe this was the first virtual zoning neighborhood meeting in the history of the city of Tempe. But I'd love to learn if there's been one before that, but that's our understanding right now. We did not have a lot of participation in that. We did have a neighbor call in who was in favor and we were able to discuss the project with that neighbor. And of course, Obina Kingsby from city staff also participated in that. But we did have a neighbor join us to discuss the project. So here's the nuts and bolts. We started with the blue column, and we've reduced from 28 to 24 units. So right away, we have not taken a hard line stance. And as you know, by working with many developers, this could have been a client who told us and instructed our team to bring back the same plan to city council and to fight for it. And I think we would have had some arguments there. But the better thing to do in this case was to find a way to be responsive to the neighbors and to utilize that appeal time. So we now have 24 units, which is reduced density. It will reduce trip generation and traffic. And I think that just that alone, obviously it takes a hit on the pro forma of my client, but on the positive side, it does directly address some of the immediately concerns. And here's the cool part. As soon as we got rid of those units, we were able to play with parking. So we started to increase from 8 units to 10 to 12, and we ended up being able to provide 18 guest parking spaces where 5 are still only required. And that was in direct response to comments from the DRC about potential overflow parking issues, and I think we've nailed that one. There was a lot of discussion of the project's height. Now again, the project's height at 34 feet with architectural parapets is directly in line with the surrounding 30-foot multifamily. And the allowable height in the zoning district is 35 feet. But that being said, as I'll show you in future slides, some of the 3-story units that were closest to the single-family homes on Hardy and along Guadalupe, there was some room for us to try to make some improvements and to listen to the neighbors. So there are 3-story units that we've now reduced to 2 stories, and I'll have some good graphics to show you that as well. We now have a more homogeneous design. We've listened to the neighbors' discussions about what they think about and what kind of designs they love and what they don't love, and we've incorporated those. And then we've changed the community pool area. Okay, next slide. So this was our original site plan. Next slide. And these are significant changes highlighted. So the 4 units that were originally at the southeast corner have been completely removed. This allowed for the additional parking spaces, and we have moved the overall amenity center to that far southeast corner. That moves that noise away. And those boxes to the left, that shows you where we've taken down the height. Next slide. So here is probably the most descriptive change. And maybe for now, I'll stop after I describe this slide. And I can always continue if there's further questions. But for now, I want you to take a look at the units that are along Hardy Drive. And now you can see that the 3 stories have been taken down to 2. You can see that the amenity center has been pulled into the back. And you can see that there's a couple units along Guadalupe, which have also been brought down in height. The architecture has changed, the unit density has changed, and the impact on the community has been reduced significantly. I appreciate all the time it takes to do these meetings, especially on a virtual setting. So for now, I'll take a pause and allow for any comments from neighbors that may have chimed in.
Thanks, Ben. All right, with that, I do know we have a public comment. I will turn to our clerk, but I think it's Christian Holme. Are you on the line?
That's correct, Mayor, and I do have one late addition after he's done.
Christian, go ahead. State your name and place of residence for the record, please.
Great, thank you. My name is Christian Hume. I live at 915 West Libra Drive, just a couple of streets north of the project at Hardy and Guadalupe. And wanted to thank you, Mayor Mitchell, and council members for letting us be a part of this and for letting us voice our support and concerns as well. So I do want to go down on the record as supporting the Gin Stage Tempe project. My wife and I purchased our home, which I said is just 2 streets north of the project. And we've lived here for 5 years. And almost daily, we walk drive, ride our bikes past that property. And for as long as we've lived here, and I'm sure for many, many years before, that corner's just been vacant. There's no sidewalks along Guadalupe, no sidewalk along Hardy that connect to, you know, the hard corner to the other sidewalks in the neighborhood. It's just undeveloped dirt land. As you already know, there's the multifamily to the east and south that completely encompass that. There's no landscaping, no trees, shrubs, nothing planted, and it's just basically a lifeless corner and definitely not fun to look at. So I want to say, just by allowing the Gin Stage Tempe project to move forward, you'll be allowing 24 more families to call Tempe home, and new life and breath will be a part of that corner and brought into the neighborhood. We'll have trees, shrubs, sidewalks that will fill that existing void. And I personally can't think of a better use for that than multifamily. I understand that the CSS district is mostly oriented to commercial and retail uses, but at the specific location, I don't believe that retail or any other commercial use makes sense. To the west, we have the town of Guadalupe with no direct connection to I-10. The north and south are all residential. And to the east, direct east, we have multifamily and then some single family residential, and then acres and acres of, again, dirt, undeveloped lots. And so this specific location, we simply just don't have the exposure to traffic that other major crossroads do. And I'm afraid that any commercial or retail use that does go in will likely sit vacant. And if we can, in fact, attract some type of retailer on that corner, we'll likely have high turnover due to lack of business that is not brought in. And also no more than a mile away at what is a major cross street, there is a 90% vacant strip mall where the anchor tenant just went out of business no more than a year ago. And, you know, I could go on and on about how the corner is not ideal for any type of commercial or retail use. But the fact is it's surrounded by multifamily and single family residential. And I simply just think and feel that Gin Stage Tempe would fill that void that has been the corner for many, many years. And I'm grateful that you consider the facts and situation while debating the use permit appeal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Christian, very much. I now turn to our city clerk. I think we have a statement that would like to be read in for the record.
We do. We have one that was just received a few minutes ago. This is from Alice Capron, Alice Capron. Hello, as a nearby resident, I have no objections to the most recently proposed 24-unit condominium development for this property at 6403 Hardy Drive. I recently chatted with Ben, the developer's legal representative, to understand what plans were denied and what changes they've made to accommodate the neighbors' concerns. I asked questions on both egress and ingress, and they seem appropriate. Building height seems acceptable. Units all have 2-car garages, and many more details are acceptable. Primarily, the properties will be sold for market value. To me, this means this will not be Section 8 housing and will be sold at a price range that is at the same value of single-family homes just north of this location. I understand that this property will have an HOA, which infers that common areas and walls of the property will be maintained. These details, as I understand them, make me accept the developer's latest changes, and I see no reason to further deny this developer's project. Thank you, Alex Capron, Tempe resident.
Thank you so much. With that, we already have that. Is there any other public comments that has been submitted via email that we need to read in? If not, I will close that public hearing comment. I do have a hand raised by Councilman Navarro.
Yes. Eric, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. You know, I think the first resident, well, actually both residents kind of said it. Christian, that was well said about the lot, the corner, and how long it's been there, and the use, and how it's slated for commercial. And it is a tough corner for commercial, in my opinion. And obviously, if the lot to the east, if anything commercial would have worked, you know, obviously the ginormous lot by the Circle K would have had something in there. But I think it's great, Ben. You knocked it out. I appreciate. This is why sometimes when we do, continuance where it has to get to this point, things happen and concessions happen, and it makes a better project. And I think the stuff that was voiced by the residents and what Ben and his group did to get it done, it's outstanding. It looks like a great project. I'm excited that it's ownership. I'm excited that it's actually a corner that's going to improve a corner. I love that it's market rate. I think that's a hit. And I think that it's a shot in the arm for the neighborhood. And those are some of the wins that we need to see in areas of Tempe that are have a potential to be up and coming. So I like what we're doing. I like what's going on, and totally support the project.
Great, thank you. And I just want to state, Ben, you did a good job as well. And I think I drive by this piece of property a lot, and I think it's something that would definitely be an improvement to the neighborhood. And I will be supporting to approve the appeal. Councilmember Keating.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I also drive by that property a lot as I live off Guadalupe, and agree with you that it will be an improvement to that area. And I think it's a good project, and I appreciate the applicant's effort to work with the neighbors in the surrounding area to make something that they're more comfortable with. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve the appeal.
All right, there's been a motion, but we have some hands up, so hang on one second. Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I'll go ahead and second that before I make my comments.
Okay.
That's okay.
Yes.
And just a couple things. First, I just want to say, Ben, thank you so much for your work and your patience and working with GenStage to really kind of find a project that I think everybody can buy into and be proud of and want to be part of the neighborhood. There's a few things within that project that one thing you didn't even really mention, and I want to make sure I got this right, was that you are creating a bus pullout right off of Guadalupe. Is that correct?
Ben, you there?
I think I was on mute. Yes, I believe that is part of the plan. Can you unmute Tristan, please? Yeah, I'm getting confirmation. That is part of the plan. Just wanted to make sure with my esteemed colleagues. Absolutely, it's part of the plan.
All right, good. I was just checking, making sure you weren't sleeping over there. But, and I think one thing for us that we've been really talking about is our traffic and moving. And one of the things that we've been working on is bus pullouts. So I think for you to help us create more bus pullouts to really make our traffic efficient is one of the things that we've been really working on. So I certainly do appreciate you including that. And, one of my biggest things that we've been working on, and I think the council as a whole, is having for sale products within our mix of housing options. So thank you so much for bringing that to Tempe. I think it'll be a really great addition. I like the design. It looks different and it's kind of cool and modern, but yet works in with the neighborhood. There's only one thing that I would ask as you move forward, because I certainly want to approve this, is the landscaping along Guadalupe just doesn't seem to look as great as the landscaping along Hardy. So, and when I mean that streetscape, just to really make it walkable and enjoyable for people that might be on it or waiting for the bus. And I know that you can probably make some additions as you go forward, but really with some mature trees to create some great shade would be one of the things that I think our staff could kind of work with you on if the council's amenable to that. But again, I just want to say thanks to you, thanks to GenStage. I'm really excited about this project. I mean, having the bus pull out right there, the bus across the street, I mean, it makes it really perfect to be able to bring more residents, more homeownerships to Tempe. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Cubey.
Yes, I just want to thank you, Ben. You're showing the way it should be done. Thank you for modeling that we can bring neighborhoods who are in conflict with developers together and we can find resolution. And I really appreciate you showing that leadership. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we have a motion and we have a second to approve the appeal. I am going to do a roll call vote.
Mayor.
Councilman
Mitchell.
Navarro.
I apologize. Just one question for Ben. On this project, you mentioned to the east of it, there's an SRP piece of land. have you guys, or did you try to work with SRP to maybe take some of that land, and is there a possibility, do you know what's going on with that land with SRP, I guess?
Absolutely. Yeah, that although it serves a very important utility purpose, is unfortunately kind of a oddity in that area for sure. One of the things that we're kind of in the process of reaching out to them on is, at a minimum, if we could move the gated part of the property up to the sidewalk. Obviously, I'd want that to be aesthetically pleasing, but the reason that we've contemplated that, and it can't be part of this approval, but we are going to address it with them, is that it creates a canyon effect, almost like an alley, right? If the gate remains so far south into the property, and we don't want that to occur. So at a minimum, we're going to have discussions with them about that. If there's anything else we can do or coordinate with them on landscaping or other aesthetics, we're happy to do so.
Yeah, I strongly encourage that, and I hope you guys can reach out, and I think it's an opportunity. However, yes, it's a great buffer. Is there something that SRP can accommodate, or even with trees, or I know they don't like trees, but just let me get hit. Just be able to have something to protect, or just kind of aesthetically look good. Would be great. And like Councilmember Arredondo said, what an opportunity to enhance the streetscape as we go down Guadalupe Road, and it possibly gives us something as a city to mimic if it translates, as we constantly redo right-of-ways throughout the year. So that's it.
Great.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Councilmember Navarro.
Approve.
Councilmember Keating.
Yes.
Councilmember Chin.
Approve.
Vice Mayor Cubey.
Yes, approve.
Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Councilmember Adams.
Yes.
Robin. Robin.
Yes, I already said yes. Yes.
Okay, that motion does pass 7-0 to approve the appeal. There you go, Mr. Ben Graff. Thank you. All right, next item on our agenda is item 6A3, is approve a utilization of a 16-month National Association of State Procurement Officials Value Point Cooperative Contracts with Dell and Hewlett Packard Company to purchase personal computer equipment and related devices, software, and consulting services. Is there any comments or discussion or a motion on item 6A3? Motion? Moved by Councilmember Keating. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Navarro. I'm going to have to do a roll call vote again. Councilmember Navarro?
Aye.
Councilmember Keating?
Yes.
Councilmember Chin?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cubey?
Aye.
Councilmember Arredondo Savage?
Aye.
Councilmember Adams?
Aye.
That motion does carry 7-0. Next item, 6A4, is the utilization of a one-year State of Arizona contracts with Courtesy Chevrolet, Don Sanderson Ford, Larry Miller Toyota, and Midway Chevrolet, PFVT Motors, and Santan Auto Partners, and Tempe Dodge for the purchase of 75 vehicles. Is there a motion on item 6A4?
So moved, Mayor.
Moved by Councilman
Second.
Keating and seconded by Councilmember Arredondo Savage. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Councilman Navarro?
Yes.
Councilmember Keating?
Yes.
Councilmember Chin? Vice Mayor Cubey?
Aye.
Councilmember Chin? Councilmember Arredondo Savage?
Aye.
Councilmember Adams?
Yes. Aye.
Councilmember Chin? Third time's the
Just
charm.
Chicago.
I voted already.
Okay, that motion
said
passes
aye.
7-0. Next item, 6A5, is approving one-year renewal contracts to Supreme Oil Company and Thomas Petroleum LLC, does business as a Pilot Thomas Logistics, for the purchase of vehicle and equipment fuels. Is there any comments or discussion? Is moved by Councilmember Keating. Is there a second?
Second.
seconded by Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Roll call vote. Councilmember Navarro.
Aye.
Councilmember Keating.
Aye.
Councilmember Chen.
Aye.
Councilmember Cubey, or Vice Mayor Cubey.
Aye. Aye.
Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Aye.
Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
All right, that motion is approved, 7-0. Item 6A6, approved a utilization of a 14-month City of Mesa cooperative contracts with Ace Asphalt of Arizona Incorporated, Regional Pavement Maintenance of Arizona Incorporated, Sunland Asphalt and Construction Incorporated, and Holbrook Asphalt Incorporated for the purchase and installation of asphalt pavement sealants. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve. I
Moved by
make a motion
Councilmember
to
Adams.
approve.
Councilmember Keating seconded it. All those in favor, we're going to do a roll call vote. Councilmember Navarro.
Yes.
Keating, Councilmember Keating.
Yes.
Councilmember Chin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cubey.
Aye.
Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Aye.
Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0. The next item under 6A is 6A7 is to award a construction manager at risk construction contract with PCL Construction Incorporated for the asset management plan for the South Tempe Water Treatment Plant Reservoir, guaranteed maximum price. 7 projected located at 6600 South Price Road. Is there a motion on item 6A7?
So moved.
So
Moved
moved.
by Councilmember Keating, seconded by Councilmember Navarro. Do a roll call vote. Councilmember Navarro.
Yes.
Councilmember Keating.
Yes.
Councilmember Chin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cubey.
Yes.
Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Aye.
Councilmember Adams. Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0. Next item is our ordinance and items for introduction and first hearing. The next section of the non-consent agenda is ordinance and items for introduction and first hearing. These items will be read and introduced tonight, but no vote will be taken. The second and final public hearing is scheduled for May 7th, 2020. Item 6B1 is introduce and hold a first public hearing to adopt an ordinance authorizing the granting of an irrigation easement to the Bureau of Reclamation over a portion of the city-owned right-of-way within Farmer Avenue for the relocation of an existing irrigation line. The second public hearing is scheduled for May 7th, 2020. Is there any public comments on item 6B1? Could you get my attention? Seeing none from the clerk, I would now look to my council colleagues. Any items, any discussion? Seeing none, that is just the first hearing. Moving on to the next item is our ordinance and items for a second hearing. Due to the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or CARES Act, this item was removed from the agenda, and the first hearing will be rescheduled for June 20th, 2020. The passage of this act has resulted in additional funding being allocated for the Community Development Block Grant and Emergency Solutions Grant, otherwise known as ESG, to assist communities with the growing effects of the historic public health crisis. With that, we now move to item 6C2, is to hold a second and final public hearing to adopt an ordinance for a planned area development overlay and a development plan review consisting of a new 3-story, 4-unit multifamily development at 430 West 7th Street, apartments located at 430 West 7th Street. The applicant is Synetic Design Incorporated. This is a public hearing item, and I believe I have is Lance Baker. I think, are you on the phone to give a brief presentation on the 7th Street apartments?
Yes, Mayor, I am, if you can hear me.
Yes, we can, Lance.
How are you doing?
You're ready to go, and we have your PowerPoint up. Go ahead.
Oh, great, great. I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you, but I will try to do my best here. If we could go to the first slide, please. There we are. Again, to restate, this is a proposed 4-unit apartment building to be located at 430 West 7th Street. The site is currently vacant. There used to be a single-family home on that site. We're proposing 4 units. Each would have 3 bedrooms. Each has its own 2-car garage. There are 3 additional guest parking spaces on the north side, entered off the alley. And there is also the ability to park 2 cars in every driveway in addition to the 2-car garage. Utilize a mix of building materials, ground-based masonry, wood-looking ceramic plank tile, smooth finished stucco with metal accents. If you go to the next slide. That would be the view from the west. looking at the 2-car garages, small balconies on the second floor. We've shaded the windows. We've done a lot of articulation on the facade to create a lot of shade and shadow, have it not be a big blocky building, if you will. Go to the next slide. This would be the corner view from 7th and Wilson. We have enhanced landscaping on the corner to try to again mitigate the building. We go to the next slide. Each of the 4 units does have a private rear yard that is fenced in. There's landscaping and trees back there. Also a patio door to access. We go to the next slide. This is the site plan showing the 4 units. Each one again has a 2-car garage with bicycle parking and a refuse space within that garage. Additionally, we have 2 parking spaces in the driveways and then 3 guest parking spaces accessed off the alley. We are asking for a few changes with regards to the general plan amendment and the PAD for the R3. We're asking for an additional 2 feet in height to go from 30 feet to 32 feet to accommodate for parapet height. We are asking for the front building setback to be reduced to 16 feet from 20 feet. We are asking for the side yard to be reduced from 10 feet to 7 foot. And for street side parking to be reduced from 20 feet to 16 feet. And those are the only accommodations that we're asking for. If we go to the next slide. Here's our landscape plan showing all of our trees and spacing. We have a lot of 36-inch box trees that are going to be along Wilson. We also have live oaks that are going to be in each of the private backyards. We can go to the next slide. This is in conformance to the 2040 general plan, which calls this area out as medium to high density of up to 25 dwelling units per acre. We can go to the next slide. And there it is again. It's a larger view. And next slide. This shows similar projects in the area. Again, we are proposing 21.18 dwelling units per acre. One of our neighbors just to the northeast of us is currently 30.94. We have 21.3 across the street, 21.8 across the street, 21.42 at Hermosa Place. And then of course, as you move closer to Mill, you have the local and all the other much more densely populated sites. We go to the next slide. And we did have neighborhood meeting. We had outreach. We had approximately 4 or 5 people attend the meeting. All of them were in support of the project. And these are just, the following slides are just letters of support. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Lance. With that, I will, let me see here. Do we have any public comments?
We do have Philip Yates standing by.
Okay. Mr. Yates?
Hello, this is Philip Yates again. I was just going to speak toward this approval, but it is just not fitting for the area. It just doesn't fit at all for the area. There's the setbacks are from 16 feet or down to 16 feet from 20 feet. And there's just no real look to it. It's very, very blasé and squared off, blocky, and it just doesn't appeal to the neighborhood. And we have a heck of a lot of parking space for places where we can utilize public transportation right around the corner. We just don't need that many parking spaces without all closed.
Thank you. Is there any other comments, Ms. Reese?
None at this time.
All right, thank you so much. Any comments or discussion? I just want to, Lance, I want to thank you for your time and thank you, Phil, for your comments. I think this is a great looking project and I will be supporting this. Is there any other comments from council on item 6C2? There's been a motion by Councilmember Keating to approve, and we do have a hand
Second.
up by Vice Mayor Cubie. I think it was seconded by Councilmember Arredondo. Savage?
Yes.
So there's a
Yes,
motion
Mayor.
and a second. Vice Mayor Kuby has a question.
Yes, I wanted to ask if an affordable housing impact statement was filed with from the developer to community development.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Lance.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yes, it was. At the time the property was purchased, it was a 2-bedroom, single-family home. It was purchased for $400,000. We don't know how many tenants were in that building or owners. We are proposing 4 units, each with 3 bedrooms, and each would rent for approximately $3,500 per month.
Okay. And just generally, I mean, I know you're asking a lot from the city. You're asking for an overlay to modify development standards. So, you know, I'm less concerned about the height because I know I'm sorry, my dogs are, doggy, stop. Going from 30 to 32 feet doesn't bother me so much because I know it involves the parapets, but the setback reduction from 20 to 16, that's a loss of 4 feet. Setback reduction, a loss of 3 feet. And then a street side parking setback reduction from 20 to 16 feet. So why and what does the neighborhood get in return for those concessions? Or, you know, why should I as a council member approve these changes? What does the neighborhood receive? I mean, obviously there's units of housing, very expensive market rate housing that will go in and there'll be taxes collected, but why did you need to get a pad overlay and those concessions to be able to build in that spot?
Really, it's because we're slightly short on the minimum net lot area per dwelling unit, which would be required to under R3 to be 2,180, and we are at 2,056. We're just slightly under on that, and Tempe does not round up, to my knowledge. So therefore, we were forced to go into the PAD. The setback reductions are really a consequence of widening the sidewalks along Wilson Street. We have a 6-foot sidewalk that's going in. And then we also have the new driveways that we actually did work with staff on to further recess our garage doors into the 2-car garages to allow for a deeper driveway, if you will, because they did not want vehicles to be able to hang out into the new sidewalk. With regards to the 7 feet, that is the rear yard setback. And again, working with staff, it was determined that, you know, they would support that basically because it was just a minor modification to the setback. And it helped also allow us to recess that garage door from the street side.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and we have a second to approve item 6C2. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Councilman Navarro.
Yes.
Councilmember Keating. Councilmember Chin.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuby.
No.
Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Yes.
Councilmember Adams. Councilmember Adams.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Are you a yes?
Yes.
All right, that motion passes 6-1 with Vice Mayor Kuby voting no. Thank you, Lance. Next item is our current events and announcements for future agenda items. I'm going to go a little bit out of order. I'm going to call on Councilmember Adams.
No announcements this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Kuby.
Sure, I have 3 items. We'll see if they appear on the screen. Thank you very much. You're about to share. Hopefully the dogs will not interrupt me. Right, the first item I'd like to talk about is a young woman named Jade Hicks. She's a nurse with the Mayo Clinic. And on Monday, when there was a protest at the Capitol. Can we load the image, please? When there was a protest at the Capitol wanting Governor Ducey to Oops, wrong image. Okay, I'll start with this one. So this is a drawing done by Olivia Thomas, and she is the daughter of the beloved. Yes? Hello?
Go ahead,
This
Lauren.
is a drawing done by Olivia Thomas. She's a daughter of Elizabeth Thomas from Tempe's Neighborhood Services. And it was for Hump Day, and we're celebrating Hump Day and Earth Day, both of which were yesterday. So the timing is a little bit off, but I was feeling low when I came across that in my email. It really cheered me up. And I just want to salute Olivia's artistry. What a wonderful job she did celebrating Earth Day and Hump Day. So here we go back to this image of Jade Hicks and other nurses at the Mayo Clinic. And she was there to do a silent protest. And she said, together we stood in silence. We stood for silence. We stood for our colleagues who are putting their hearts and lives on the line every single time they go to work. And we stood for those colleagues who have died serving. We stood for the people who have lost a loved one to COVID. We stood to protect those who are vulnerable. And whether they can see or understand it, we stood as nurses advocating for each and every single person who was there today because their health matters. While some of them shouted at us, made fun of us, and called us liars, we will still be there to care for them when they need it. So I just salute all the healthcare workers and the brave counter protest that took place on Monday at the state capitol. Then the last item is I'm having my Connecting with QB event virtually on Saturday at 1 o'clock, and hopefully the image will come up. So I'll be featuring State of Sustainability with Braden Kay, our Director of Sustainability. And then we're going to hear from Richard Adkins, who is our urban forester. He's going to talk about the state of Tempe trees. And spoiler alert, it's fair to middling, the state of our trees in Tempe. And then also we're going to hear from Human Services and Fire and Medical Rescue staff with any OVID-related concerns and questions that we might have. So please look at tempe.gov and you'll see how to log on to that virtual Connecting with QB event. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.
All right. Councilmember Chin.
There we go.
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Keating.
Yes, Mayor, I should have a slide here. Yeah. All right. I want to invite you all to download OpenTempe. Many of you know that I worked with, that's Vice Mayor Kuby. All right. Many of you know that I worked with a local Tempean, Christopher Walsh. He owns Manoa Softworks. And it started out as trying to list businesses that were still open in Tempe on my website, but he offered his time and services pro bono to create a mobile application that you can download to your phone. It's available both on Android and Apple. And we have over 200 businesses listed there currently. And you can sort it by zip code or service or however you want. And we have more businesses being added, including quarantine specials and things like that every day. So if you just search in the App Store or on Google Play, OpenTempe, you'll find it. And please support our local Tempe economy by frequenting the businesses that are still able to operate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
No, just really everyone stay safe and practice that social distancing. Obvious when we do get back. Yes, please. And then currently, like Councilmember Keating said, support that local business if you can now, if they are able to have takeout. But also when we start getting back in things, we can practice social distancing and making sure that we also are utilizing the resources in our city, and everyone stay safe. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That does it for this evening. I think, Councilmember Adams, you have your hand up?
Yes, can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yes, under announcements, I just wanted to announce that Wednesday, April 29th, I will be having a Join Jennifer from 6 to 7 p.m. and it will be virtual, and you can go to our website to get directions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, with that, we're going to move on to public appearances. I will look to our city clerk. Do we have any public comments?
Mayor, I do have one item of note. We just received an email from Abby Grisler Letterer. She states, "Good evening. My opposition email was not made public nor given a voice during the Tempe Council meeting. I am disappointed at this process. I do want to put on record that there was no public comment card that was submitted to the clerk's office, but I will read her commentary into the record. It does relate to the Gid Stage project. It says, "Good afternoon. I am a homeowner and reside in close proximity to the lot on 6403 South Hardy Drive in Tempe. In regard to the proposed condominium units, I respectfully oppose this project. Adding a condominium complex not only lowers the value of our property, but it also increases traffic and raises safety concerns due to an increase in population to our community. My husband and I chose to raise a family in this neighborhood because it is quiet and is filled with homeowners who look out for each other. We regularly ride our bicycles with our 7-year-old. We often walk our dogs in the evening, and increased population increases traffic to our area. It increases the risk for the children who play here. Lastly, we have a concern that the increased population density will have a negative impact on crime. We live on a quarter lot in view of the proposed development. On more than one occasion, our cars have been broken into. Most recently, windows were broken out in both cars in our driveway. We're concerned that a large development will increase the frequency of such incidents. Please do not approve the Gin Stage Tempe project. Sincerely, Abby Letterer, resident and homeowner." And I want to make it clear that her email was received on April 20th. It did go to all council members.
Thank you. With that, seeing no other comments, I will adjourn the meeting. Everyone be safe, practice social distancing, and have a good rest of the week and good weekend. We're adjourned.